We're on.
All right.
Finally.
About time we did another Van Cave.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. The treatment has been rough on the schedule and the voice. So, I don't want to be the guy that uses that, whatever that program is that takes all the air out so you sound like a millennial podcaster that talks 10,000 miles an hour without a break. But I have to stop about every 15 seconds and remember what the hell I was trying to say.
Yeah, it's more than understandable. I'm just glad you're still feeling good enough to do these now.
I'm feeling okay. If my brain clears up after 2 or 3 days, and it's an 8-day cycle, and then the voice goes. So I've got a little window.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought of a cool way to open it to talk about this guy. 30 years ago or so, my father took me hunting on the Baird Ranch outside of. That's down in Alpine.
I used to hunt on the Bird and Eaglemeyer ranches down there.
Baird.
The Baird Ranch. Sorry, wrong ranch.
Yeah. My dad was he when he lived in Fort Stockton, he was a diesel mechanic and did a lot of work down there. And I shot a mule deer and we were tracking it, and we came across a cave in the ground. And I hadn't spent a lot of time down there. I mean, I'd been in the national parks and stuff, but here's this cave. That's a separation between 2 layers of rock and just a slot that disappeared into nothing. And my dad was talking about how that part of the country, drug runners and stuff, he wondered how many bodies are down there. And he goes, man, there's a bunch of crazy people that crawl off into that for fun. And I found one. So this is Bill Bentley. And Bill and I have kind of followed each other in circles. We were just discussing. I think we've shaken hands a couple of times before, but never. This is the first time we got to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and we're all 3 ham radio operators. That's where I got to know you, was through ham radio 20 years ago.
Yeah, at least.
And we're all just such longtime Midlanders and lifelong West Texans that our paths have just continually crossed here and there over and over again.
Yeah. We pretty much have to accidentally step on each other because we had this conversation the other day again. Tim and I have known each other since the 80s, but it was only like 10 or 12 years ago that we really started hanging out because even though we do a lot of the same things, I was in a different group of motorcycle people and played in a bunch of different bands, and we didn't actually just sit on the sidelines and talk until we were in bands that would occasionally cross gigs or something like that.
Exactly right. So. Yeah, and then once we kind of worked out where a lot of our paths kept crossing, and we figured out, hey, we can. I'm kind of looking to put a band together. So am I, and all this kind of stuff started happening, and ended up becoming the very best of friends after just being kind of distant friends for 30 years or 20 years.
So the first time I ever actually met Bill, was at Murray's, and you guys had a meeting there,
right?
The Caver group. Now, magic thing about Murray's, that's where our group hangs out. The Fencing Club hung out there back in the 80s. Mad Dog Rugby Club hung out there quite a bit. So there's all these really cool groups. But when you get into a club like that, you miss everybody else's club meetings. So when did you guys start off?
Well, the Permian Basin Speleological Society, it was formed by Tony Grieco and myself late 1982. And then because I'd been caving since 1980, and so had Tony. And we decided to get our club chartered with the national group, and we became the 300th Grotto, which is the key word for caving club by cavers. And we were chartered in January 1983.
Wow. And that's been a pretty steady run, right?
The club has had its ups and downs. We generally have about 10, 15 good members and maybe a total of 30 people that just join. Never see them, never make a trip. But it's right now it's in a kind of resurgence. It was almost dead for a couple of years, and then it just started up again.
That's pretty cool.
I would think that with the sort of the swell of population and influx of people coming in, it would just the laws of probability would work in your favor on there being people interested in it that might seek it out.
Yeah, that to a point. Part of it's the same with most every club. if it's not on a smartphone or a handheld device, they're not interested. But
Yeah.
it takes a unique type of person with that interest that's going to go ahead and do it no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. We had a similar conversation about that, about how going out and seeking discovery and seeking an experience, a real adventurous experience, is something that the younger generation seems less and less interested in.
And caving is one of those one of those things. I'm down for damn near anything outdoors, and I was forced to learn technical climbing and ropes and all when I was a young SWAT officer. For whatever reason, it was just essential that we all had to learn rappelling and how to smash through the window like an 80s action movie and engage targets. And I've never actually carried a rope on a single out of 100 missions, you know. And so I'd be following Bill Bentley's posts on Facebook and going through caving adventures. I'm going, cool, nope, cool, not a chance, cool, no.
Well, I've been interested in it off and on. Casually, my wife and I, anytime we go anywhere in Texas or New Mexico, throughout the desert Southwest especially, we'll look for caverns that have some sort of an easy tour or an easy self-guided hike that you can do through them. But there is a place that I'm sure you're very familiar with by Inks Lake called Longhorn Caverns.
Been there many times.
Yeah, I bet you have. In fact, I thought about you the last time we were there because I was talking to the tour guide about, caving and that sort of thing, and she said, well, I tell you what, if you're interested in it, there is a certain type of caving that they do there where you get down into the tight, dark places. Yeah. And she said it's an excellent way to see if you can handle it, if it's for you or not. Yeah. And I was like, I'm actually kind of interested in that, but life kind of took over and I never did it. But I thought if I ever got serious about it, just to see if I was okay with the darkness and the heat and the sort of constrained, areas that you're in those situations, that would be a good place maybe to start. What do you think about that?
I've been in places that have been described as claustrophobia 9000, little small areas when you can't move. I was watching a video the other day. We went into a cave. It was a crack, dropped about 16 feet. And you literally had to hold on above you because there was no room to put your arms beside you.
Wow.
And people would pull you up through this crack. And we found 700 foot of undiscovered passage.
And that's the payoff right there.
West Texas, that's a big discovery.
Oh, yeah. And that right there, that is what it's all about when you make a discovery. It's like, yeah, that really sucked, having claustrophobia 9000 for several minutes while I was trying to get through there. But look, I've just discovered something no other human being has ever discovered before.
How'd you get started with it?
Started with caving. We had took a trip to what was then Slaughter Canyon, or it's now Slaughter Canyon Cave. It was called New Cave back in the day. We took a trip there with the Park Service, guided off trail, no lights, but one of the rangers, as we were leaving, he said, if you guys are really into caving, you can get some permits, go into some caves for free on the BLM. So I applied, and you had to do it by mail, and we got our permits and made our first trip. That was May the 9th, 1980. And when I was caving that trip, I got bitten by the cave bug, and I have yet to shake it. That was a little over 39 years ago.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's I have several of those similar bugs in my life. Once you get bit by them, you can't ever get rid of the virus.
Yep.
I don't know. My what gets me about it, I can handle being claustrophobic, in tight places, no big deal. People that can't wear helmets, or people can't sit in small cockpits. I've slept in coffin racks on sailboats. I've done all that stuff. Doesn't bother me. I have fallen off of every obstacle on just about every obstacle course I have been on. I'm an absolute klutz. And I've done the Pointer Rocks, Fort Davis, and a little bit of technical climbing here. So I guess you need some agility to do this.
Yeah, it helps. I'm getting so old. My last rope climb was about 5 years ago, and I haven't been on it since. In any distance, 100 feet or better. I did about a 30-foot here last month.
Oof.
No biggie. but it was against a wall and it was fairly easy.
I had no idea how difficult that the cinder climb.
Yeah, single rope technique
Yeah.
is really tough.
Wow.
Definitely a game for the young.
It is. That's if you think a ladder's bad, those are horrible. I mean, it's such a neat concept just to be able to climb nothing but a rope straight up, and but especially with all your gear on going up there. Ugh. Yeah, that was exhausting.
It helps if your gear is, we call it fine-tuned, where it's working in optimum, shape. So you're climbing and you're expending very little energy, no harder than walking upstairs. If something's out of whack, you can wear yourself out in just a few feet, and it doesn't take long.
I know I wore myself out on any kind of climbing and rappelling because I was terrified the whole time. So I know that was part of it. So what are so you get into caving, you join the club, you've maybe been to a few caverns and things, and where do you go from there? How do you kind of get into it?
Well, our club has always tried to have a trip every month, and whether that's a cave in the Park Service, which requires a permit, or the Forest Service, which requires a permit, or the BLM, which requires a permit, or on private property, which requires permission. And that can be problematic at best because property owners change and conditions change. We've had some access to caves that are great, and you go back and it's just closed, and somebody did something and nobody knows why, and the landowner is upset, and so it's ended. And some great caves have been just stopped.
Yeah.
That's too bad. But that happens often in different areas of interest as well, not just caving, where one bad apple spoils it for everybody. That's a shame, but it does happen. We, in a lot of places that we go, just, trying to explore abandoned places and trying to explore ghost towns and trying to find old stuff related to history, we've run into some of those roadblocks. We've had some landowners tell us, yeah, go ahead. Just kind of let me know about when you're going to be there, or if you see this guy, tell him you have my permission, whatever. But that's getting harder and harder and harder to do these days, getting onto private land to explore stuff.
Yeah, even with the liability releases filled out and signed, they don't care.
Yeah, no, they don't. And ultimately, I think what some of that may have to do with is the fact that you can sign a release, a liability. When I was volunteering, when I was colonel with the CAF, we used to have to do that all the time. If you wanted to go for a ride, or if you were going to be in an airplane basically with the engine on, even if you were just taxiing or whatever you were doing, you had to have all these waivers on file.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine who's a lawyer told me, those really don't mean anything. That they can make you say they're not responsible all day long and agree that they're not responsible, but the law says they are responsible. And so that, I think, is what has scared off a lot of property owners and letting people they don't know onto their property because they know they have a certain amount of exposure that they're absorbing or subjecting themselves to potentially. So,
but what I can understand, I'm sure you see this in caving, is you'll find, like I was on Playa de Oro in it's the west coast of Mexico, outside of Manzanillo. Beautiful beach, gold beach with like a pyrite or something mixed in with the sand. It's just iridescent, beautiful. And there's a cave, and they said that, and the understanding I had is you could just walk in it, and then there was a spot where it would drop off, and the serious cavers went in there. Oh yeah, I got to check this out. And first of all, I learned that's where all the mosquitoes lived. But second, it was just completely vandalized and trashed, and everything just right there. So, how many good caves are close? Like, how far do you have to go for that?
For here, the closest cave is kind of a toss-up, whether it's over at Monaghan's near the city dump. There's a cave called Rattlesnake Cave, or south of here near Bakersfield is Amazing Maze Cave. And then there's a few little shelters and things over around Crane on Indian Mountain.
How big is the Rattlesnake Cave?
Yeah.
Rattlesnake Cave is almost a half a mile of crawling on your hands and knees.
Wow.
Gosh.
There's 2 rooms in there where you can actually stand up, and then more crawling.
Wow.
I've heard of the ones down by Crane. A buddy of mine who's a retired game warden is the one who brought those to my.
Most of those are more like javelina dens. If you crawl in there,
Okay.
you're going to come out with ticks and fleas.
Well, he said there are some other places that have kind of petroglyphs down there. It's all on private property, but there's some kind of more open caves, surface level caves and indentions there where there are petroglyphs and there are various Indian art and that sort of thing. And he's got a piece of land down at the base of Castle Mountain, which is on the opposite side of the Castle Gap.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting things down there. We found. One of the things that we're always finding when we're exploring down there, I haven't been in a few years, but you can find old fire pits that are 150 plus years old.
Right.
And you're like, man, somebody set a fire here. And then you realize, yeah, a long, long time ago that this fire was set. Pretty amazing.
That's cool. So immediately you think caves, you think trapped, cave-in, falls. How often does that kind of thing happen? Pretty safe?
Pretty rare out in our country. If you get into back east where a lot of water flows through the cave, it dislodges things. So you could be in there walking, and where you'd walked many times before on this particular trip, the rock would move because it's been washed.
Yeesh.
Out here, we just don't have that. Caves don't flood like that. They don't take on a lot of water, but there are a few that do.
Have you guys heard about or found any instances where maybe drilling for water or drilling for oil or fracking has done anything to sort of disrupt the water table and maybe fill up an underground area that wasn't filled before?
No, haven't run into that. Now, I've been in caves, border cave over near the Texas-New Mexico border.
Mm-hmm.
It has can't see it on the surface unless you look, but there's remnants of a windmill. But in the cave, in the big lake rim, you can see a pipe come out of the ceiling and it makes a joint and goes down and standing in the water.
Oh, wow.
And it's been there for years.
Uh-huh. Long before they knew the cave was there, huh?
Well, they knew the cave was there. They were after the water source in the cave.
Gotcha.
But the windmill's long since been gone.
Huh.
We went to, I was just telling Bill before you got here, we went to the one of the old Cinnabar mines in Terlingua. A friend had a key to that, and I think they shut those down in the 70s. I can't remember. And normally, when we go to places like that, all these old places that we visited that are shut down, there's just not a lot of the original stuff there. You know, things are turned over, burned,
Right.
graffiti, whatever, and then weather. So we go down to that mine. Have you been there to that mine?
I've been to the surface. I won't go in a mine like that for safety reasons.
Well, it's because you're smart. We were idiots. Like you say,
But one thing,
you know what you're doing. We didn't. So.
one thing that's unique to caves always have fresh air 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
A mine, you can dig it from now on and it'll never
Yeah.
have fresh air. You have to pipe it in.
The people we were with, there were a couple that all we actually, I mean, in all seriousness, we went in the vent shafts on a couple of sides that there was airflow going through them. So, and we went just a few feet into followed the cart trails and all. We really didn't go, but you could taste the mercury in the air. You could taste that in metal.
Oh.
And what was cool, they still had mine carts. They still had the rails. There were tools, the Cinnabar flasks. Those were still sitting around. We have a wine bottle out there with you've seen it. It's out there off of my deck.
Mm-hmm.
Wine bottle with a big hexagonal pipe joint connection.
Yeah.
Those miners apparently drank that wine all the time. There were just thousands of those bottles laying around, and those were joints they used for the that they would pump water in to get tailings out. But yeah, I could see where that would get dangerous in a hurry because we would get in there and you could start tasting it. But my buddy knew where to go and where not to go. But it was fascinating because that mine looked like somebody just blew the whistle and they went home 40 years ago.
That's the same way Ogle Cave in the National Park. We were the first permitted recreational group to go into that cave in 1983 when they started a permit system within the park. And we got in there and there was a complete 1912, 1914 guano mining operation in place. And it's like one Friday they all left and never came back. The remnants on the surface are gone. There's hardly anything, but inside there's cables and mining cars. The tow sacks had rotted out, but you could see it was
Wow.
a table with a cup and I think it was a 1914 El Paso Standard Times newspaper, perfectly preserved.
Wow.
It's just sitting there.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, okay, so I have a question for you because you were talking earlier about how caves breathe. And I've heard this term over and over again, and I don't know what it means or even if it's a legitimate term to describe a cave. But I've heard some caves described as live caves and some described as dead caves. And I'm like, what is the difference? What does that mean?
A live cave would mean there's formations in there that are growing, they're still dripping, everything is pristine and wet. A dead cave would mean, for whatever reason, the water stopped and everything dried out.
Okay,
It's not
gotcha.
growing anymore.
Okay.
That's the difference.
All right, gotcha. So places like, for example, like Carlsbad Caverns, that's still a live cave because there's still a lot of water. There's a lot of new formation that's happening there.
And something you'll talk to all the experts, and I disagree. You know, they say it takes so many millions of years for formations to grow. Maybe in one cave in one particular instant, but in a lot of caves, it's based on all the variables. The variable of the rain, the porosity of the rock, how quick the rock dissolves,
pH of the water.
the carbon dioxide in the water. All of that plays, creates an acidity and dissolves it. All of that plays into effect. Airflow that can change.
So it
something.
might happen over a course of maybe centuries or even decades or whatever, just depending on the factors.
I've been in show caves back east, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas. They have formations growing on the handrails.
Wow.
Now those handrails are 40, 50 years old, so,
Yeah,
do your math.
exactly.
So it all depends on the variables.
That is an interesting thought. I'd never really thought about that. You always hear, if you go to any of the major caverns where normal people go just to go down and see caverns, that's always the spiel that you get, of that these formed over millions of years and this era and that era, and it talks about the transformations over that time period. But I never thought about them being able to form that fast. But on the other hand, now that you mention that, if you think about how powerful water is and how pervasive erosion is, it only makes sense that over a period of decades or maybe just a century or two,
Yeah.
really big changes could happen in an environment like
Just
that.
water and time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I know we have like the big touristy ones. There's Sonora,
Mhm.
Caverns of Sonora, of course Carlsbad Caverns.
Yeah. Sonora, privately owned now, I believe.
It's always been.
Yeah, it's always
Always
been.
been.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I know the owners real well. It's pretty cool when you take your girlfriend down there and you walk into the visitor center and the manager says, "Hey, Bill." and he hands you the key to the cave and a flashlight and says, "You kids have fun."
Oh, that's awesome.
So I get to take them on a private tour.
That is great.
That is cool.
That's a
So,
nice connection to have. yeah.
Very, very nice connection. And that's trust. Because, a person could go in there and destroy the place.
Right.
But they trust me, and I've helped them out and continually get compliments on stuff I did 20 years ago.
Well,
So they remember.
you someone like you who has all these different directions of passion toward caving. Everything from the geological part of it, the discovery part. You obviously, and with the experience you have, you're going to be the last person to do something stupid or
Exactly.
irresponsible that could damage something that's such a treasure.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's neat.
And you were talking about airflow. A lot of caving in my time, they'd say, well, you get some airflow, which indicates, your cave is breathing or it's a particular direction of the flow. But I'd always, you put your face against the opening and you feel a little breeze. But when we were digging in 1986 on Lechuguilla Cave, which you probably heard of, making it from just a little known 70-foot drop into what is now the deepest cave in the United States, we're digging through 23 feet of rubble and fill. Well, this thing was blowing, caused by barometric pressure with a large amount of cave down to a small opening to a large opening. And they clocked that at 43 miles an hour.
Jeez.
And now they've had two different gates. They had a gate that was originally put in, which is a series of 55-gallon drums welded together, and just a grate on top with plastic. It didn't seal very well. Now they have and I haven't seen it, but there's like a submarine tunnel with actual submarine doors that shut tight.
Yeah.
So you never get that airflow.
Huh.
And they did that because they didn't want the cave drying out.
Yeah.
But that was quite a discovery
No doubt.
in those days.
That's pretty amazing.
That's amazing. That has to be so cool to be a part of something like that.
Oh, yeah.
That blows my mind. I
And
don't know, how big was the? I want to make sure I got this straight in my head. Is the Slaughter Canyon New Cave? Is that the one that 25 years ago was like a special tour that you would sign up and go with a guide, or is that a different one?
Still is.
It's the same.
thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But see, not far from, within 50 feet of the entrance of New Cave or Slaughter Canyon is Wind Cave. Down the canyon, and I just visited a couple months ago, was Christmas Tree Cave. But there's Ogle, Rainbow, Helen's, Corkscrew, Lake, Ladder, whole bunch of caves right up that canyon. Now some of them, like Ladder, all day hike. You leave before daylight and you come back before
Yeah.
when daylight's gone late at night.
Wow.
Long trip.
This is going to remind me, that was another connection. Like I said, my entire life, somebody will go, "Hey, you probably know Bill Bentley then." It was Tom Bemis.
Yeah, I know Tom. In fact,
Yeah.
I went to his retirement party over there in Carlsbad.
Yeah,
No.
he's
He's a ham operator, a caver, and just a pilot, all kinds of neat stuff.
we were put together on an airplane search, and wreck chasing people, that's a strange relationship because just like these caves, you want to always make sure you're dealing with somebody that takes care of things.
Right.
That if it's an easily approachable wreck that's 100% intact and there's all this crap, that they're not going to be Instagramming it and putting it out everywhere where everybody can just pull over and get out and go steal crap off of it.
Which
So I
they
had the
will.
coolest conversation. We were looking for a lost plane, and I had the coolest email conversation. In fact, I reread it the other day, where we're kind of feeling each other out. And I didn't know who he was, and then he went on and I told him some of the stuff we'd done, and eventually we just both threw our crash maps on the table and we're comparing stuff online. And I had found some crashes they were missing, and they had some that I wasn't, and we got together. And in fact, he invited me to go on one near where we found the Navy plane, and I got sick and couldn't go. But he said, "Hey, you probably know Bill Bentley then," and then that's when I figured everybody's into caves. So
Small world.
Yeah.
I got to tell you a story. We're at a cave club meeting, and we're standing in line to order at Murray's. Graylin Coffin's in front of me, and he sees somebody at a table, and I say, "Hey, Graylin, how are you?" And he says, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm here for the cave club meeting." And the guy goes, "Cave club? Caving? The only thing I know about caving is some guy named Bill Bentley works for the cable company." Graylin turned around and looked at me. I just went like that. my reputation precedes me.
I love hearing about. I mentioned to somebody that we were shooting on the caving club, and they said, "Man, I had no idea they had that in Midland."
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I thought, the guys that are around this table, we ought to have a T-shirt made that says, "I had no idea they had that in Midland,"
Yeah.
because the fencing club and all the other stuff. This is just different things that people do.
There's a lot of really neat stuff going on, but it's just sort of the nature of West Texas, I think, that people generally come out here to work.
Yeah.
And when they come out here to work, they work all the time. And so there's not always an awareness for some of the finer things, more Renaissance type things, that people with those types of interest would go for. But there's just not that much awareness because people don't seek it out even though it's there, because they're here a lot of times to do one specific thing. They're here for a set amount of time to do a whole bunch of work and make as much money as they can, and they're just laser focused on that. So
Yeah, we have a saying, the oil boom bringeth and it taketh away, because they'll bring us members, they're here for a short time and gone.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. Same thing, Matt and I are Masons, and Freemasonry, it's kind of the same thing here, where there's not a lot of Masons in West Texas. Most of the Texas Masons are actually in the I-35 corridor, which is also referred to as the Masonic corridor. So when guys come out here during the oil boom, and they want to join, or they're from another lodge, and it's exactly that same situation where they're working a lot, and as soon as there's a downturn, they go back to where they came from, and you lose that active membership. You know,
we had when I was in the Coast Guard, I got sent to Cape May, New Jersey for school, and there were, I don't know, 20, 30 guys in the class, and there's a big map, really nice map of the U.S., like a relief map, and we were talking about where we lived, and I showed them where I lived, and they said, "What the hell do you do for fun there?" It's in the middle of the desert, and one of the guys was from like Nebraska, right in the middle of the fairway of the United States. And I said, "Well, here's the Guadalupe Mountains, and there's a beach, so that's where I go to my duty station." And he said, "How far away is all that?" And I said, "Well, 2 or 3 hours to a lake, 3-4 hours to mountains." 6 hours. I can't believe that. And I'm showing them all these distances. And one of my buddies from New York, one of the guys in the class, he goes, "Yeah, so this is my house, and it's like 3 hours to my cousin's house. It's right there." He was moving like these little tiny. So the point is, we drive what people commute to work in big cities, and we can cover from the desert to a cave in the mountains. And it's just fantastic.
Yeah, people who always say there's nothing to do out here aren't.
They're not looking.
They're not looking, that's for sure. But I think maybe the kind of stuff they're looking for, they haven't expanded their horizons enough to either know or care about the sort of things that we're all interested in. There's tons of stuff to do out here. There's always some kind of a new adventure to be had. You just have to, you may have to look a little bit for it, but it's out here. So.
What was caving like before the internet? I mean,
well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we would have a newsletter that went out by mail, and we used telephones, believe it or not, and the actual no-shows was a lot less. Now that we have instant communications, we still have the no-shows and a lot more, and no explanation. Just they were saying they were coming and they're not here, and may hear way later something happened, but. I don't know. I think it's just too easy.
Well, it is, and I think also it has to do with the fact that we're bombarded with information constantly, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of everything that you've seen or looked at or clicked on in a day's time. And then a week passes by, and you're like, "Oh yeah, man, I was going to go, to that meeting," and you forgot about it.
Yeah.
Well, what we experienced in the fencing club, and then some of the old guys, we got together and talked about it. Under the insurance rules, you had to have a coach, people of certain levels that wouldn't let people just go crazy. And so back in the 80s, they would say, "Okay, I'm on call, may or may not be there, guys, so Bill, you're up." And Bill say, "Yeah, I'm definitely there, no problem." Okay. And so Bill shows up and Tim shows up, and if it's 2 guys, you just go in and work out. Fast forward to 2015, and everybody's on Facebook, and as soon as the person who normally leads, it would be me or somebody else, they're like, "Man, I can't get there till such and such. Yeah, you know what? I got this thing I really got to finish." And then if it rained, and finally I just chewed the whole club out. I go, "Guys, this is an indoor sport." Right? Like you get in there and change clothes, and you work out, and you change clothes again, and you go home. It doesn't matter. And it's rain, But people, I think the information age, when you get that, when you get home from a long day and your butt starts to kind of grow roots into that recliner, and it's time to meet up with the cavers or go work out with the fencing club, and you're looking for excuses. If there's absolutely no way to face the other guys in the group,
you'll go.
Right, you'll show up. You'll be that one. That's why I would tell my athletes.
But it's real easy to just go, I ain't gonna make it.
Yeah,
and then you don't even have to deal with anybody. You in your mind, you put the ball in their court and you're done.
Yeah, that's what I tell my athletes is that door is your challenge. Is you get through that door, and I don't care how bad you feel. We can work on that here, but you get through that door and you're already up over the next guy. So So what does it take to learn to cave? Are there instructor certifications or ratings, or how does that typically work?
There is, but we don't require that to go caving. You just get with our group and make a trip. We tell you the basics. You're going to need a light on a helmet, knee pads, gloves, jeans, elbow pads if you want them, the basics. And I always go by the rule of threes. That's every 3 people minimum on a trip. Each of you have 3 light sources, and each of you tell 3 people where you're going. And with that, if that's followed, you can have the worst disaster and it'll work out. Luckily, we've never had anything really bad. Now, I did in 2000 in June on my way to Lechuguilla Cave, slipped on the trail and broke my leg. That was interesting.
Oh, wow.
Off work for 9 weeks, but 100% covered by the national parks, federal government, because I was doing volunteer work. But that was interesting thing to happen. I couldn't even do it in a cave and do it right. I had to do it on the trail.
That's
Heading for the cave.
And when Emily Mobley broke her leg in the cave, I don't know if you're remember that was about 1992.
No, I don't remember that.
To date, that is the costliest rescue in the history of rescues. And they had a mountain of rope. It's probably 50 foot tall and 50 foot diameter. It was huge, of rope that was used. It took them 4 or 5 days to get her out.
Wow.
And used a lot of resources. In fact, I had my gear sitting by the door with packed and ready. I was just waiting for the call to come relieve. The call never came, thank goodness. Having been involved with the Jessica rescue, I knew exactly what I was up against. In fact, the same time I was married when 9/11 happened, and I was pacing the floor. And my wife at the time, Debbie, she looked at me and says, "You're going to go if they call you, aren't you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And there was no question, no arguing. But luckily they didn't call.
I love to tell my 9/11 story. Kent Spencer was our SWAT commander, and he's now the police academy director, and he's not a normal person. It's like his plate shifts every once in a while. And we all worked shifts. I was a patrolman and on the SWAT team, and they would always have to make admin calls to us and pages and all when we're trying to sleep. And I mean, you'd wake up and they go, "Hey man, we're ordering new boots. What size do you want? Or how many rounds is the sniper team going to use at the school you guys are coming up?" And you're dead asleep. So he would always do that. Well, he had to, because he had to get it turned in by a certain time, and he was always notified late. So he would call me and excitedly tell me of some attack that's happening, and we need the rifle team right now, man. The Martians are here. And he would say, "Oh yeah, this," and then whatever's in the news, this religious cult went crazy and they've kidnapped the school, man. We need you on top of the Wilco building right now. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "No, dude, we just need to know, do you guys need new such and such for placing an order?" Okay. And I had come home. We had an accident late in the shift, traffic accident. I was out waving traffic till wee hours, and I got home and I fell asleep in my recliner. And he called me up, and phone rang, and he said, "Hey, yeah, man, terrorists have crashed airplanes in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Passengers took one down and it landed in a field." And I'm like, "This could have been a text message. What do you want?" He's like, "No, dude, I'm serious."
Yeah.
And we went through this for a while till I turned on the TV and saw it, and that's how we got it. And then we had no idea what was going on after that. So, but I first heard of the caving club when during the rescue, the Jess McClure thing. And how big was the club then, and how many of you guys?
We probably had 25, 30 members back then. We were fairly active. How I got involved with working in cable was sent over to meet the PD to possibly raise the cable line so they could get the drilling rig in there. But I got started talking to Chief Roberts, fire chief, told him I was a caver, and that sometimes in caves we have to dig open passages. Well, that bought me a ticket, the first one to go down the rescue shaft.
Oh, wow.
And I started drilling over with a little pneumatic hand chisel furnished by Intergas. And I was in there, what to me felt like 20, 30 minutes. Reality was 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
And they shut off the air, and I hollered on the radio, "What's up?" Said, "You need to come out." I said, "But I just started." "No, you've been in there a long time. You need to come out."
Wow.
So I came out, and I spent the next 3 days rigging people up in seat harnesses and keeping at the time we used miners' wheat lamps. And I got my two buddies, Pat and Terry Hill, to bring theirs out, and we kept them charged and kept it constant. So we kept everybody in lights and kept them in harnesses so they could
Wow.
bring them in and out.
Wow.
And my hat's off to those drillers, better men than me.
Yeah, that was an interesting time in Midland history. Everybody really pulled together and did the impossible. It was a great.
And incidentally, the other night, for the first time, I always say I'm not a hero, and I don't feel like it, but Jessica herself said, "Yes, you are a hero."
Oh, that's cool.
I just said thank you.
That's
Wow.
cool.
I'm friends with Jessica's dad. We went to school together, and we stay in touch with one another, and that's a big deal because she likes to keep a real low profile these days.
Yep.
So
I thought that was pretty cool.
definitely.
You know, that was interesting when that happened. I was in the Civil Air Patrol, and everybody was trying to find something to do.
Mhm.
And even the Civil Air Patrol, we got airplanes and all this stuff. Can we do anything? and there was some talk of airlifting people, moving people around, but there were corporate donors with bigger jets and stuff like that. I don't think we ever got down to it, but if they ever needed it, but people were just lining up. The community just did.
Everybody wanted to do something, and it was really way too much manpower, but
Yeah.
really couldn't turn them away like that. And it's funny how you meet people through life. Years later, warehouse guy in Lubbock, he was in Memphis. He helped load, working for FedEx, helped load that water jet on the plane that came out
Oh
here.
wow,
So everybody all over helped with that.
that is cool.
Yeah, and that's just one of those stories that absolutely captivated the entire world at the time. Then it became the stuff of legend thereafter, and now it's part of Americana. It's part of pop
Yeah.
culture. You know, it's
Right.
it's an amazing time.
You know, there was I think it's still on YouTube. Somebody directed me to it. There was a lot of talk about how much work welders put into it because of all the gear they were breaking, the bits.
Right.
They were using a boring tool. They were boring. That's when they were building an overpass at 191 and Loop 250 at the time.
Yeah, they use a giant auger.
Yeah.
And one thing that people don't realize, when you're sent down a round hole, you don't know which way to dig.
Yep.
It's perfectly round, and so they lowered a piece of flagging tape down toward the well, and we started the drift over.
Wow.
Yeah, they were. That amazed me. That was something I wanted to ask you about caving. I've done many minutes of YouTube research on caving just for this interview. But one thing, how do you map a cave? I mean, then and now, how does that go?
Back in the day, they used a compass, just basic compass, and you use a thing called a Sunto, which has a compass in one end, an inclinometer in the other, and then you use the tape.
Oh, okay.
And it's just basic surveying skills. Now they have these rangefinders, and they're damned accurate. But instead of guessing the ceiling height, you point it and get a beam back and get
Right.
it pretty accurate, and side to side and forward and backward. They still use the tape just for accuracy. But I've seen them survey around a column and come back with almost perfect accuracy.
Wow.
So they allow so much for stuff like that. But
Can't imagine.
And to give you an idea what surveying a cave will tell you, like the Amazing Maze Cave, it's all under one hill, right off of I-10. And from one edge of the cave to the other, it couldn't be more than about 450 feet total. But yet they've mapped almost 5 miles of passage under
Wow.
that hill. It's just a big
Gosh.
honeycomb.
Huh.
So
I can't imagine that. That's fascinating.
And I'm one of the very few people that knows that cave enough. I can be anywhere in the cave and be on the surface in about 5 minutes. Other people take them hours in there, get turned around and lost.
Yeah, I would be one of those. My sense of direction and stuff like that is
And in
non-existent.
and in 39 years of caving, I've never been lost. obviously I'm here, but I've been temporarily misplaced a great number of times.
I could see how that would happen. We get turned around in the underground passages at Rattlesnake Air Base, the bomber base. We get to go down there, and some of that gets awfully strange because it starts looking the same, and if you're not,
Oh yeah, you can get disoriented really easily.
Yeah.
I can remember on Joe Rogan's podcast not long ago, several months back, he had he interviewed a guy who did basically in cave scuba diving is basically what it is.
Oof.
I can't remember what the guy's name is, and a lot of times there's obviously the added danger of you only have so much air. It's even easier to get disoriented in a water environment because of the lack of gravity and sense of direction. And he ended up getting disoriented and got lost in pitch black darkness, running out of air, and managed to find his way out at the last minute. And just listening to him tell the story, you can tell the guy is reliving it. As he's telling the story, he's sort of telling it first person real time, and everything that he went through moment to moment just sort of crystallized in his brain because he thought he was going to die.
Well, usually that is a death sentence.
And it is.
Wow.
He said that he beat the odds by the factor of something like 1,000 because people just don't survive those situations. Yeah.
And one of the greatest cave divers in the world, I think his name was Sheck Exley, over in South Africa, just kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper until one day he just never came back.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so far in, I don't think they've ever done a body recovery.
Yeah. Gosh.
It would put other people in peril just to try to do that.
Yeah, it would be absolutely just impossible to even try because of the level of danger. That makes perfect sense.
And then in some caves, you're so far in, so many rope drops, and so far back that you know that even a broken bone could be a death sentence. You're so far back, it takes a long time to get you out.
Wow.
So you have to put all that in perspective, and like I said, is definitely a game for the young.
Yeah, definitely part of what you should, your total thought process on how much risk you're willing to assume to do something like that in a given situation. Man,
it's amazing.
Gosh,
I like diving. Interested in caving, the two together, no.
Yeah, it's a smart man.
Well, it's.
And I've been dumped in 69-degree water. Doesn't sound cold, but it's freezing.
Cold. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hypothermia can set in real fast in 69 degrees of water. Yeah.
Yeah, even just piddling around there at like Balmorhea or something. If you're not in a skin,
it's just the thermodynamic efficiency of heat loss in that situation is greater than a lot of people understand. It's the same thing with riding motorcycles. You can become hypothermic on a motorcycle on a 50-degree day if you're not dressed properly, and you get off the bike and you think, oh man, this is a nice, cool, crisp day. This is great. Let's go for a ride. And you're not dressed properly, and an hour later you have hypothermia. It's very easy for that to happen. So
I can't remember the numbers, but the Coast Guard has a rule. If the water temperature's this, you have to wear a Mustang suit. And so we wore, regular blue ODUs with a gun belt and body armor. So you have your ammo and all your crap on. And then you have to put the Mustang suit over that, which is, if you watch the crab fisherman show, Deadliest Catch, those are Mustang suits, the big bright ones. And we bitched about it to no end. We hated it. It was just, we would wait till find the warmest water report we could, just maybe be 1 degree. We wouldn't have to wear the damn things. And we went out and we were miserable, hot in it all day. Ran our mission and came back, and a bunch of us went surfing after and actually got in that water at that temperature and surfed for a couple hours in, just in suits. And it started to get dangerous. At one point we both realized we're fatiguing faster. He knew how to surf, and I was just learning, so I'm thrashing around like an idiot.
Wasting a lot of energy.
And even then I thought I'm a super strong swimmer, and I had to stop just because I can tell it's having an effect on the muscles and all the energy and all that. So
I did go in a water cave, partial water, partial air, but it's called 09 Well. It's down near the Barnhart area.
Oh yeah,
in the old 09 Ranch, under University of Texas land that's part of the Texas Cave Management Association's agreement, that and the Amazing Maze Cave. But I went in that, and you have to wear a wetsuit. It's a big concrete steel door under a windmill, and you look down this crack 128 feet. So you rappel down about 30 feet, do a redirect, and that puts you right by the pipe for the windmill, and you go all the way down to the bottom. So you land in water about ankle deep, and as you start down the passage, the water gets a little deeper. You have a rimstone dam, step over. Next one's up to nearly your knees. You go down about 20, 30 feet, another rimstone dam, and the next one it's up to your hips. And you keep doing this till it's way over your head, but it's good to have a wetsuit.
No doubt.
As long as
Wow.
I had a light one on, as long as I was moving, I was fine. But for this old West Texas guy here who can't swim, it was quite a deal to be in the area where there was no touching the bottom.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And those suits do allow you to float a little bit.
And UT
Yeah.
Lands they oversee that, or it's part of their.
It's part of their area, and which I'm a lifetime member and a former board of director for the Texas Cave Management Association. But they have an agreement with them, a management agreement.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We manage those 2 caves.
Yeah. Anything that UT Lands controls, it's hard to get access to it unless
very
you're.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Yeah.
we've been down that road a couple of times.
Every time I take a trip, it's big book of paperwork has to be filled out.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Gosh.
Yeah, it's we're going through that right now on a Cold War history project.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring up speed on that.
Oh okay.
But yeah, that's amazing. I can't. It's fascinating and terrifying all at the same time. I don't know that I could be a caver.
But it is definitely fascinating. There's no doubt about that.
I like to know that I've at least tried it. So so there's that. Very cool. I'm going to link your webpage. If that's cool, is that what would be the best way to get to the pictures and the?
There's limited pictures on the Caving Club website. There's far more on my Facebook page or the club's Facebook page.
Okay, I'll link those
We
too.
can easily link those. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about something else. As I've followed you on Facebook for years, and your All Things Midland is the history you're keeping up with.
I had breakfast one morning with David Pine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know him or not.
Yeah.
But we were sitting there at Lori's when it was
still
open.
Lori's, yeah.
And we were talking. He said, the Old Midland page is pretty cool, but it's just all Old Midland. I said, you ought to create a page that is all things Midland or everything about Midland, something like that. And I got to thinking, and I said, what would it be for? And he said, well, you could put old stuff, new stuff, anything pertaining to Midland on there, and it would be good. And I thought about it, so I went home that morning and started the group. And it's grown, but not like the Old Midland page. But we're I think almost 3,000 members right now.
Yeah. What really gets me, I'm loving the photography, and I know a lot of it's yours.
The more modern photography is a lot better than the old days,
but
I had a point and shoot 110 Instamatic.
Okay, well, here's what Tim and I were talking about. I've had a camera since I was 5 years old, and it was a little, what do they call them, Echromatics, the little 110 cartridge camera. I got my first one when I was 5 or 6 years old. I went into 35 millimeter in the 80s, digital as soon as it could. I never stopped to think and take the pictures that you take.
I just find the time.
But you do it, and that's the whole thing. I mean, it takes an eye. Tim's an artist. I'm somewhat of an artist when it comes to photography, and I look at stuff. I have pictures of old airplanes. I have pictures of outdoor trips and things of that nature. And I did sports photography, yearbook and newspaper stuff in high school, and I did a lot of portrait photography. And I have a lot of good pictures, but I don't have the stories that you've gotten, and that's the coolest part. And I dug through, and everything I had was incidental. It was a good-looking girl at a parade in 1985, but there's the old belt buckle building or something behind it. You've done this stuff with an eye for history. Like, this is going to change one day. This is going to be different.
Yeah.
That's what I say. The more pictures you take and right now are going to be more valuable 20, 30 years from now when things have completely changed.
I'm becoming more and more cognizant of that
Yeah.
as especially as Midland, Odessa goes through such drastic change. My first real point of interest in historic, doing that sort of thing for the historical record was when I worked with Judge Hyde on that documentary based on all of his presentations. And I've been more and more cognizant of it lately, like I said, because of all the change that we're going through. But something happened a few weeks ago that really, really hit me hard. The church where my wife and I got married 25 years ago next month.
The one at Cuthbert and
Yeah.
Andrews, yeah.
They raised it. And I thought, I went by one day as they're getting to the very end of the building, which is the sanctuary part where the stained glass and all that used to be. And I thought, you know what, Sharon and I probably stood right about there 25 years ago and took the most important vows we've ever taken in our life. And it's just being,
Yeah.
It's gone forever.
it's gone forever. Yeah.
How about the Tim and I were telling stories about in the 80s and 90s going out and riding motorcycles around the drag.
Uh-huh.
And didn't we decide you and I were probably out riding at the same time when Wild River Canyon burned down?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were in different groups, kind of sort of half-ass knew each other. I was riding with, my bunch of guys who were much cooler than his bunch of guys. And our
Right.
bikes were much cooler than theirs.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And whatever the deal
That's
was.
just how it worked back then.
Yeah, that's how it worked. And we were all out riding motorcycles one night and wound up out there, and there were motorcycles and hot rods. What would you do for a picture of that today?
Oh yeah, to have
Right.
any record of Wild River Canyon
Or
at
just,
all.
just that
Well,
moment.
you
Just
know-
like that particular moment in time for
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of reasons. And you and I, by that time, both of us had boxes full of cameras and crap.
Yeah.
We like I said, we didn't have the eye like
Yeah.
that Bill has to go, we should take a picture
we should,
of this.
yeah. Somebody should pervert. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Wild River Canyon. Not a lot of people know it. Fasken owns that now. They're drilling there now. They're doing all this stuff over there now. But that was a big deal, and it was a big deal to Midland in the early '80s when it came along, and it went away pretty quickly, and it sort of vanished rather from the local historical record in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If you really, really dig, I've done some research before and found who the owners were, the man whose brainchild it was, and how it kind of died. There are some people who have written about it on forums and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, there are no. I can still remember the advertising campaign and the TV commercials for it, the jingle for it.
Yep.
All of that stuff, and it's all gone. Like there's nobody has preserved that, and I feel like we lost something with regard to Midland history
yeah.
and all that stuff going
I have
away.
a few newspaper clippings, some pictures, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all I could find.
Yeah, and it was such a big deal when it opened
Yeah,
up.
yeah, it was.
Well, they say the more commonplace something is in its own time, the more rare and valuable it is later.
Yeah,
This is
good
true.
point.
Think about Gibson's. Sits there on Cuthbert.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find any pictures of it.
Yeah.
None. No
Yeah.
one has any. It was so commonplace. Why would you?
Why would you
Take
take
a
pictures of
picture.
Yeah.
Gibsons? Yeah,
And now it's gone, and it's lost forever.
yeah. And also same thing, kind of to a lesser extent though, with the just right down the block from it, the old UA Cine 4 building, which is now an event center, and it's gone through a bunch of different changes. But I lived on Kansas Street when they built that building. I was like 7 years old, and I can remember playing in the construction back in the days when they didn't
Yep.
even fence off construction. We would go in there, and they were putting those big concrete and aggregate walls up and a huge concrete floor, and we were in there playing as little kids. And what I wouldn't give to have a picture of us playing in that construction as they were bringing that building up. At that time. But just those things, just like you said, man, you don't think anything about it. It's just, hey, it's a little progress. It's a commonplace thing. They're building that,
And I was there at that that corner before even the Tierra del Sol shopping center was.
Oh yeah.
All that was a big carnival the night I graduated.
Yeah, it was dirt. It was a dirt lot, and they would always bring carnivals there. It was like the spot in Midland. If a traveling carnival was going to come through, I don't know if the city had zoned it specifically for that, but they always had the traveling carnivals carnivals come through. It was between the UA Cine 4 and the Gibsons.
Yep.
There was nothing there but a giant dirt lot, and it was always where the carnival came.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you guys remember the Plantation Apartments
Yeah, I lived there.
back behind there,
Mm-hmm.
my uncle did too. My uncle Bill, and they closed it down. And right before it was torn down,
Mm-hmm.
they let SWAT team have it.
Oh,
And we trained in there and got to
Do
blow
some
doors
training.
off and stuff like that. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool. So
Yeah.
and I didn't take pictures of anything. I even remember where my uncle's old apartment was,
Mm-hmm.
and we breached the door off of it, and all of it allowed to have a picture of that.
Well, like I said, I lived on Kansas Street. That apartment complex was on Kansas Street, just further down from where I lived. But I remember I had 2 or 3 friends who lived in that apartment complex, kids my age or a little bit older. And I can remember being in there, and there was like a pool in the center section and a big game room with pool tables, and there was always, a lot of partying going on there. It was there's some wild times going on there. I can remember my mom saying, "You probably shouldn't go down there by yourself from now on."
I got a lot of memories from
Yeah, it was a very single kind of place.
Yeah, it was a single
when we were there.
swinger kind of
Yeah.
a scene over there.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, I can't. I remember when we were running ops through there. I don't think there were very many 2-bedroom places. They had small 1-bedrooms and big 1-bedrooms. I don't remember.
inefficiencies. That's what I
Yeah,
was in.
yeah, it was like just damn near a motel room.
Yeah, kind of a neat place though. Looked very colonial looking with the big pediment, the columns outside. It was just whitewashed, the whole building all the way around. Very posh looking.
Yeah,
you know,
kind of
for
had the
time.
European looking into a courtyard.
Yeah,
thing. That was
yeah.
that was cool.
Corinthian architecture outside. It was kind of
Yeah,
neat. Yeah,
but no, I'm enjoying that. I do. I see those pictures and just something as simple as a street sign or something that you've found from 30 years ago that you just remember all that stuff. It's great.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff happening around there. That was a real happening area of town. That's
Yeah.
where the Burger Chef was, and the Taco Tico was right back behind there.
Yep.
The movie theater, the Sears was right across the street. The Midland College Technology Center was Sears.
Yep.
Before they were an anchor part of the mall and all that. That was just that was a
And
hopping part of town.
That was the drag.
Yeah, and that was the drag.
That was
yeah.
that triangle.
Run up and down that triangle, go
Yep.
around that triangle all night long. Yeah.
Is there even a drag anymore?
No, kids don't do that anymore.
I don't know.
They stay home and play Midnight Club LA when they want to drive. They don't actually go out and get in a car and drive around.
That sounds about right.
They do it via video games. They do it on Twitch. You can watch them on their Twitch channels on Saturday nights. It's crazy, man.
What are you gonna do?
We're old.
Yeah, we are. Gentlemen, that's about an hour.
All right.
So I'm going to link, and it's Permian Basin
Speleological.
Speleological Society.
Mm-hmm. When we formed the club back in 83, 82, one of the guys, he's deceased now, but he said, "What does this mean, society?" And I said, "Well, when we drink our beer, we hold our pinkies out. So it's a society."
Indeed, sir.
I'll drink to that. Yes.
Yeah, it was popular fencing clubs. It was society. In fact, I have one of our original patches that said society, and we changed it to club just because that became the standard. When it would say club, and you would just that was the blank. So you'd be New York
Right.
Fencing Club, whatever, not society anymore. Fantastic.
You might also link All Things Midland.
I'll put that on there. It is approval, right? You have to be approved on there. Is very well controlled. These guys are doing a fantastic time. So
we don't allow anything that's
No hubbubbery.
yeah
No buffoonery. Stay respectful.
no advertising.
And no
I love it. That's so cool. It's something in which you can just follow and not have to worry about seeing. And
An ad for shoes or
and
sunglasses.
and no offense to anybody else or anything else, your lost dog or whatever else. There's just so many places for that.
Right.
It's like when you go up there, it's somebody, hey man, check this out. I found a picture of me and my wife on our first date at the Blue Star Inn or something, like just something cool. There's something always cool there. So little history out here in the middle of the desert.
Well, this was fun.
Bill Bentley, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Gentlemen,
Cheers, boys. Good one. That was fun. Sir.